November, 1858. On the Sharrowfell incline the air smelled of coal smoke and frost, and a single lantern bobbed in the wind like a star about to be blown out. Eamon O'Rourke, the Irish stoker everyone called the Liability, watched a loaded night freight shudder against the couplings. The driver laughed at him. The yardmaster waved him off. And Eamon felt it, the wrong tremor through iron. That meant the hill would choose someone to blame before dawn. Like stories where the underdog fights back. Subscribe, so you don't miss the next parts. Eamon O'Rourke shoveled with a patience that made the fire behave. A furnace that roared at others would soften for him. Sparks bit his sleeves and died. The boiler held a steady note, and the driver, Pike, leaned out of the cab and spat toward the sidings. "Keep your mind on the shovel, Paddy," Pike said without turning. "No poetry in the firebox." Eamon let the insult pass. "Pressure's good. We'll have her ready." Across the yard, the night freight to Penrith stacked up. Coal, timber, barrels that stank of spirits, flats of machinery, held on the high siding by a brake van and gravity. Sharrowfell dropped hard. A mile of Steelinitine. Chaltronitri Miratai. Foreman Briggs strode past with his ledger. He looked over Eamon. "You, O'Rourke, tend Pike's boiler to the summit and keep out of trouble. I don't want any of your—" He flicked his eyes toward the guard's van. "Opinions." "I entered the coupling crack in the defect book yesterday," Eamon said. "Third wagon from the guard. If it lets go on the grade," Briggs laughed, a dry hinge. "If the moon falls, I've signed it fit." Pike grinned. "See? Foreman says it's gospel. Shovel. Poet." Once, during a shunting accident, a boy lost 2 fingers. Briggs wrote the report so Eamon's name sat where blame could be placed. Since then, trouble. Unreliable. Irish. He learned to measure his voice like steam. Enough to move, not enough to whistle. They took the engine to the siding where the freight waited. Wind combed the heather and rattled the covers. The guard, a boy barely sprouted whiskers, tightened his handbrake and avoided Eamon's eyes. "You set for the grade?" Eamon asked. "Yes, sir," the guard lied. The wheel creaked a token turn. Eamon knew the feel of a brake that bit, and one that only sulked against the rim. He crouched at the third wagon. The coupling looked like a healed bone. Metal thinned, a hairline shining under lantern light. He put his palm on it. The iron thrummed with the same small worry he felt under his ribs. "Up," Pike called. "We're late already." "This wants changing," Eamon said. Pike's answer came with the clank of a reversing lever. "And I want a quiet fireman. Couple up." There was a way to bend. Seconds stolen. A word dropped. But the man with authority tonight was Briggs. And Briggs was already turning pages as if paper could keep trains from choosing their own disasters. They coupled. The pin dropped with a hollow sound he didn't like. He tightened every chain he could touch and pushed each buffer with his shoulder. The train answered in groans. On the platform, a woman pressed a parcel into a soldier's hands. A collier sang off-key. Life kept moving. Back on the footplate, Eamon said, "If she runs, we'll need the guard's brake, and yours at once. She won't run." Pike wiped his nose on his sleeve and gave the steam a nudge. "And if she does, I'll tell Briggs you were daydreaming again." Eamon fed the fire and listened. Trains have a grammar, and fear conjugates early. A click, a shiver, a breath held by iron. Beneath the cab, the grade tugged like a big hand on a sleeve. At the summit board, the wind changed, gusting hard enough to wobble his lantern flame. The guard's van jolted. Somewhere behind, something argued with gravity and lost. He heard it. A thin crack like ice under a skate. He was off the footplate before Pike knew he'd moved. Lantern in hand, he ran along the ballast, shouting to the guard. The boy's face was all pupil and panic. The third wagon shuddered, the hairline opened, and then the pin sheared. Metal screamed. The front half of the train surged as the rear lost them and began to roll. Slow. Skeptical. Then faster. Taking the slope. the fog and the valley lights with it. "Runaway!" The guard choked. Pike swore from the cab. Briggs looked up from his ledger at last, but only to see Eamon already moving. One lantern against a mile of hill, and a train that had decided it no longer needed men at all. The first seconds of a runaway are quiet, like a breath drawn to scream. Then the wagons found the grade, and the scream came. The iron kind that bites teeth. Eamon felt it and ran for the footplate. Pike grabbed his sleeve. "Leave it. Signal the box." "There's no box on the summit," Eamon said, prying free. "Unpin the head. Engine only." Briggs thundered up, ledger flapping. "Touch that coupling and you're done, O'Rourke." "Then sack me after." Eamon kicked the safety chain loose and dragged the coupling pin from the hook. The locomotive lurched free of the forward wagons. Men, up there, spun handbrakes, wheels squealing. Eamon swung into the cab. "Reverse. Sand on. We chase." Pike blinked. "You're a stoker. Tonight, I'm the only man listening." Eamon hauled the reversing lever into back gear and cracked the regulator. Steam hissed. The engine shoved herself backward, tender first. Down in the fog, the runaway's tail lamps bobbed, red eyes sinking. Cold tore at his lungs. He leaned out and judged distance by sound, clatter fattening to thunder. "More steam." "We'll couple on at speed. You're mad." "We'll kiss and hold," Eamon said, "and pray the chain." They dived after the rear portion, rails ringing, frost hissing under sand. The lantern painted the tender coal. Beyond that, only ink and iron. They closed. The van's tiny balcony leapt at them. The boy guard braced at his wheel, cap blown askew, eyes huge. Eamon brought the whistle down in 3 long blasts. Danger. Then rolled his arm, the old sign. Wind, wind, wind. The boy wrenched his screw brake. Sparks feathered off the shoes. The runaway trembled but did not yield. "Easy," Eamon told Pike, though his hands shook. "Ease her until the buffers touch." Pike did it well. The tender's buffer kissed the vans. The kiss became a shove. Wood moaned. Iron coughed. Eamon took the lantern in his teeth and climbed the tender irons. Between moving buffers, there's no room to air. He set a boot on the step, grabbed the swinging hook with numb fingers, and felt for the drawbar. "Hold her steady!" he shouted. Pike swore, but held. The gap was a knife edge. Eamon slammed the hook home, dropped the pin, and the chain took the strain with a bang that climbed his arms. Engine and runaway became one creature, enormous, barely listening. He scrambled back. Countersteam! Pike set the lever deeper in back gear and opened the regulator to turn the pistons into anchors. The machine dug in. All through the train, couplings howled. The boy wound like a soul at a well. "More," Eamon barked. "Your life's in that wheel." They bled speed, inches at a time. Fog thinned, and a new sound rose, the river, and beyond it, the junction. Kestrel, where the mill branch met the main. A signal post loomed, lamp red as a vein. "Points against us," Pike said. "God help us." Whistle again. Eamon worked the cord until his palm burned. The cry leapt ahead. Clear the diamond. Danger coming. In the box, a shape moved. But distance is a liar, and time a bad joke. Briggs's voice rattled in Eamon's skull. "Liability, Irish." He spat grit. "Hold," he told the iron. "Hold." For 100 yards, they were winning. Then the grade steepened, as if the hill remembered a grudge. Steel screamed. The train gathered itself to run again. The boy's arms shook. From the canyon of wagons came chains rattling and casks thudding like heartbeats. Beyond the red lamp, past the junction, a smear of coach lights slid, something on the main. "If we break here," Pike said, "we'll scatter them into the river." "If we don't," Eamon said, "we'll take the mail." He made his choice. He thrust his lantern and coat into Pike's hands. "When I shout, Give her all the sand and keep the countersteam. Don't you let go. Where are you? Forward. Eamon set his boots to the tender coal and climbed into the rush and roar toward the van, the terrified boy, and the only break left between the valley and a headline with names. Wind tore the breath out of his mouth as he crossed from the tender to the van. The guard's balcony bucked under his boots. Chain links twanged, wood canted. The boy had both hands on the wheel, wrists roped with effort, cap flattened by the slipstream. Hold it! Keep it biting, not snatching, Eamon shouted. I can't, the boy cried. It won't. His voice pitched up as the train lurched, then steadied under the engine's countersteam. Eamon jammed his shoulder beside him and seized a handspike from the corner rack. On 3, he said. Breathe. 1, 2, heave. Metal groaned. The screw bit deeper. The van shuddered and the railing sang like a bowstring. Good lad, Eamon said, and only then saw the whites of the boy's eyes. He was younger than Eamon had thought. A smudge of coal cut across one cheek. Name? Ned, he panted. Keep winding, Ned. Don't feather. Bite. Eamon glanced past him. Fog peeled back in strips. Low to starboard, the river showed its black spine. Ahead, a smear of lamp glow suggested roofs. Kestrel. The junction. A long moan drifted across the valley. The male's whistle. Not pleading. Not angry. Simply certain it had the right to be there. Eamon took the van's tail lamp from its bracket. The metal was cold enough to burn. He thumbed open the lens and found the little slide. Red. White. Red again. Some lamps had 3 aspects. This one had 2 and a mean temper. He jiggled the slide until the flame brightened and the white showed. Sir, Ned said, seeing him lift the lamp. If he can see me, he can throw us where we won't murder anyone, Eamon said. Into the pit. Ned's voice wobbled. Every boy knew the sand drag, a raised hump of gravel and ash meant to eat axles and spare human bodies. Better a scratch than them dead, Eamon said. He clapped Ned's shoulder. Eyes on the wheel. He climbed. The van's roof was slick with rime. Iron ribs gave him just enough purchase. The world turned to noise. The counterbeat of pistons, wheel hum, the hollow boom of bridges passing under the train. He raised the lamp and made arcs. Big. Wasteful. Impossible to miss. Red, white, red. He cut the air again, shoulders burning, the glass chiming. For a breath he saw the signal box. Timber. Windows squared up with frost. A man inside an orange halo of oil light. The man turned. Eamon slashed the dark with white again, then stabbed the lamp toward the catch points and the sand drag. There. The raised berm beyond the down-home signal. The boxman moved, a shadow crossing Lavaire's. Eamon slid on his belly to the edge and peered forward. The home was red. Good. But red didn't save anyone if the points lay the wrong way. He held the lamp high and chopped it down, twice, as if his arm could snatch the rails over by itself. Beneath him, the train tried to run. The grade pitched steeper for the last 100 yards, and all their hard-won drag began to melt. Ned's brake shrieked. The chain to the engine snapped taut, slackened, snapped taut again. Every jolt a tooth in Eamon's spine. He dropped back to the balcony. Ned, you've another trick? The boy's lips were blue. He nodded toward a crate under the bench. Inside, 2 seasoned oak sprags, greasy with old use. Saints bless you, Eamon said, and meant all saints, not the ones Pike joked about. He wedged his boot against the step, leaned over the wheel, and timed the spokes. When I shout. He took a sprag. It was meant for standing trackside and biting a rolling wheel. Using it at speed was a prayer. The van jolted. His teeth rang. Now! Eamon drove the sprag between spokes. Wood cracked, bounced, bit, again. The van shook like a trapped animal. He smashed the second sprag into the other wheel. Somewhere up the chain, a barrel burst. Spirit sprayed, reek icing his throat. "Keep her biting," he yelled to Ned. And the boy, crying outright now, wound and wound. Ahead, the home signal's lamp seemed to swell. The boxman's arm flashed in the window. A set of points clanged over. One, then another. Eamon couldn't see which. He lifted the lamp high and made one last plea. White held aloft, then down, stabbing toward the drag. From the corner of his eye, movement. The male's headlamp, a pale coin rushing left to right beyond the junction. Close. Too close. He had one thing left. He spun and waved the lamp toward the engine, describing a tight figure 8, then stabbed down twice. Old yard talk. Get ready to drop. Then drop. He had used it on shunt nights with men who listened. Would Pike? Pike, who called him poet and liability. The tender's whistle gave a single answering bark. Eamon's throat hurt with relief. He straddled the coupling on the balcony, both hands on the pin that would free engine from van. The chain yanked and eased, a beast testing its leash. If he pulled too early, the wagons would hurl past and he and Ned would go with them into the pit alone. Too late, and he dragged Pike and 100 tons of iron into gravel deep as a grave. He looked between his boots at the blur of sleepers. He looked ahead at the red lamp and the fork of rails shining wet. He looked back at the boy, whose whole body had become a brake. Hold, when I say hold, Eamon said, not sure which of them he meant. He wrapped his fingers around the iron, felt every scar on his palm wake up. He set his body over the gap. He raised the single lamp to the box, to the valley, to the mail rushing past, witnesses or ghosts, and drew a lungful of cold air that tasted like salt and iron. Now, he told the hill. And he pulled. The pin came up like a tooth wrenched from a jaw. The chain snapped slack. The engine jolted as its own weight bit the rails. Eamon pitched backward onto the van's balcony, chest to wood, knees skidding, and clamped both arms around the stanchion. "Hold!" he shouted, though he knew Pike couldn't hear him over the roar. The locomotive, freed, dug in with counter-steam and sand, wheels chattering. The van and the long tail of wagons heaved forward, lighter now, angling toward the points the boxman had thrown. "Down!" Eamon dragged Ned to the deck and blew out his lamp with a hard breath. The spirit stench rode the wind. One spark and they'd be a torch on wheels. He flung the hot chimney into the dark and felt it leave his fingers like a sin cast off. The forks of rail opened ahead, a gleam, a choice made of iron. To the left, the main ran through the Chimchori Chun, where the mail's headlamp cut across like a slow, pale comet. To the right, the catch points and the sand drag rose like a low brown wave in the fog. The van, screaming, took the right. Gravel blasted up under the wheels. The sprags, Eamon Shrivavon, driven into the spokes bit. Snapped. Bit again. The screw brake shrieked as if it had a throat. Oak-packed wheels climbed the hump and sank. Iron howled against grit. Somewhere behind, a chain snapped and shot past, with a sound like a whip. "Brace!" Eamon wrapped himself around Ned, one hand behind the boy's skull. The first wagon jackknifed and buried itself. The next plowed it deeper. Casks leapt, staved, and burst. Clear liquor fanned into icy spray. They hit the end of the drag like a body hitting a wall of sand. The van bucked. For a blind second, Eamon saw stars not on any flag. Wood gave. Iron shrieked. His shoulder flared and went numb. Then, silence. Sudden and vast. Like a church after the bell stops. A gust brought sound back in slices. A high tinkling as spare links settled. The distant, orderly thunder of the mail on the main, passing clean. The breath of the river. Eamon rolled and coughed grit, tasting coal, metal, and spirits. Ned curled in on himself, wheezing. "Alive?" Eamon said, voice raw. The boy nodded, then whimpered when he tried to move his wrist. "It hurts." "Good." That's the body arguing to stay. Eamon tore a strip from his own sleeve and bound the wrist sloppy and fast. Breathe. In. Out. On the main, the male's driver leaned out of his cab, white scarf whipped flat. He saw the van sunken in the sand drag, the ragged shoulder of wagons piled like broken teeth, and the freed locomotive, Pike's, standing square, and hissing 10 yards short of the diamond. The male gave a single, astonished note, and was gone. From the box, the signalman, cap askew, vest unbuttoned, pelted down the steps, oil can banging his knee. "By all that's lit," he gasped at the wreck. "I thought you'd take the mail." "You threw for the drag," Eamon said, still on his knees. "I saw the levers move." "Aye," the man said, eyes wet. "You gave me white and waved for the pit. I near lost my hands on those irons." Pike arrived at a trot, lantern up, face chalk under the coal. He took in Eamon, Ned, the wreck, then Eamon again, as if his eyes couldn't decide what was most impossible. "You mad bastard," he breathed. It wasn't an insult this time. "You pulled it at the points?" "At the last," Eamon said, and only then noticed his hands were shaking so hard the bones clicked. Men from the yard came in a scatter. Porters, a plate layer, 2 carters, each with a different idea and the same wide look. They began clambering over couplings, hauling free rolling casks before they could slide back onto the line. Someone swore at the stink. Someone else made the sign against fire. Briggs arrived last, ledger under his arm, hat set as if for a portrait. He placed each boot with care, as if the ruin might stain him. His eyes ticked over the caved-in wagons, the burst barrels, the sand scarp ripped raw, over the counts and sums he would be asked to recite, and landed on Eamon. "What have you done?" he said. Not a question. "Kept the main clear," Eamon said, standing, though the world tried to duck out from under him. "You'd have had bodies and letters in the river." "You uncoupled at speed," Briggs said. "Against orders." "You interfered with the consist, you," he sniffed, almost dainty, "and you destroyed cargo belonging to Simmons and Sons." "The coupling failed," Eamon said. He pointed at the third wagon. Its torn throat gaped, metal edges half bright, half the dull brown of old wound. "I logged a crack yesterday, 3rd from the guard. Your mark signed it fit." Briggs's mouth made a small, sympathetic shape. "There is no such entry." "I wrote it," Eamon said. "And I am telling you," Briggs replied, tone patient as a schoolmaster. "There is no such entry. You were warned about your flares." He glanced at Pike. "Driver, you'll attest you saw him pull the pin without order?" Pike's jaw worked. He looked at Eamon, then at the ground. He signaled. "I held." It was as much as he dared. The signalman burst out. "I took his white and turned the points. If he hadn't—" Briggs cut him off with a small slice of the hand. "You'll make your statement at dawn. Not here." He opened the ledger and wetted a finger. The page made a watery sound as he turned it. "Mr. O'Rourke, you are suspended as of this minute pending inquiry. Simmons will want a neck for their loss." "Ned," Eamon said, ignoring Briggs. "Can you stand?" The boy nodded, pale as fog. Jamin slid an arm under him and eased him to his feet. He caught then a glint at the base of the shattered coupling, an iron flake no bigger than his thumbnail, bright along one edge, dull along the rest. He knelt and took it. The bright was fresh tear. The dull wore a faint film of rust, a crescent like a tide mark. Old crack, he thought, whispers made of metal. Old as yesterday, at least. Briggs's voice droned on, naming supervisors and fines the way a curate recites saints. Eamon tucked the shard into his pocket and felt the tiny weight settle there. A truth too small for Briggs to see because it didn't add up in his book. He looked up the grade, to the summit where the Runaway had started, to the place where he'd stood, with a lantern, and been told not to have opinions. He looked back down at the sand drag, the boy with shaking lips, the men whose hands still shook too. "Write what you like," he told Briggs quietly. "Ink can lie. Iron doesn't." Briggs smiled as if at a child. "We'll see whose story holds in the light." By dawn, The yard looked like a church after a fight. Sand drifted over sleepers, splintered staves stuck up like broken ribs, and the air had that like in Sunday, cold, quiet, that follows a night of shouting. Eamon came anyway, coat buttoned to the throat, suspension. Be damned. A constable at the rope gave him the kind of look you keep for stray dogs. Eamon kept his hands in sight, like a man vising his own bones. They were already lifting the wreck with jacks and foul language. The third wagon lay open-mouthed, the coupling throat showing a torn grin of iron. Eamon stayed at the rope until the platelayer's bar levered a fragment free, and the iron sang against stone. When no one watched him, he stepped on the rope, crossed neat, and picked the fragment up. Bright along one edge, dull brown across the curve. The dull part gris, fibrous, like bread pulled apart and left in weather. Oi! The constable stumped over. You're not cleared. I'm suspended, Eamon said. Not struck blind. He wiped the flake against his sleeve, or tried to. The brown didn't wipe. This is the difference between last night and last week. The constable looked baffled. Eamon slipped the shard into his pocket and let himself be escorted back across the rope. He'd held irons hot and cold for 6 years, on 2 railways and a steamer. He knew the feel of honest break and the lie of an old wound pretending to be new. Briggs arrived later, hat and ledger, and the same idea as ever. Control. He posted notices with a neat hand. Accident inquiry at noon, office. And beneath in smaller script, staff to abstain from speculation. Ned came limping behind a porter, wrist crudely bound, eyes flinching at shadows. Eamon moved to him. You tell your mother first, he said softly. Not Briggs. I don't live with, Ned swallowed. She scrubs at the almshouse. I'll go tonight. Go now, Eamon said. Before anyone feeds her, a different story. Ned nodded, but the porter shook his head. Foreman says he gives his statement first. Briggs's office smelled of oil, damp paper, and the sourness of ink that's been heated by breath. The Sourmaxim Mames. Feckbook lay on the desk like a quiet animal. Eamon could see the notch in its spine where a string had once been tied and wasn't anymore. I entered the crack yesterday, he said, staying on the threshold. Third from the guard. Briggs turned a page with the care of a man counting shillings. You imagine entries that suit your needs, Mr. O'Rourke. I find it childish. Let me see the page. You are suspended. Suspended men do not handle records. It's not a record, Eamon said. It's a witness. He knew how small his voice sounded against Briggs's room and Briggs's hat and Briggs's ownership of how mornings went. Briggs smiled for the constable, a tidy public smile. You may wait outside. Eamon waited in the passage with the coal dust on the floor, forming little maps and continents under his boots. Through the open door of the clerk's room, he saw Miss Whitlow at her high desk, sleeves rolled, hand quick and exact. She glanced up once and then back to her lines, as if she'd seen a bird at the window. When she rose to carry a stack of papers to Briggs, she paused as her shoulder met him by the jamb, and a small square of blotting paper slipped from between her folios to the floor where Eamon stood. She did not look down. She carried on. Eamon let a breath out slow. The blotter was pink, good cotton pulp. Ink mirrored in it read backward, faint but legible in the raking light of the passage. Crack at eye of hook, third from guard, hairline bright, watch on grade. EOR. The hand was his, reversed. The date was yesterday. There were little hair crossings where the pen had paused and bled. The same peculiarities his hand had learned from cheap pens and fast nights. He picked it up and folded it into his cap. Miss Whitlow returned, and without stopping, murmured, They burn the blotters weekly. She kept walking. He wanted to thank her but didn't. Thanks could get her caught. He went to the smithy. The place was a hymn to heat, furnace breathing low, the anvil dark as a midnight window. Tom Larkin, who had hammered every coupling on the Northern Line at least twice in 20 years, stood with a rasp the size of a church key, and watched Eamon bring out the shard. Larkin didn't ask questions. He wiped his thumb, spat, and pinched the fragment like a jeweler. "Bright, here," he said. "Fresh. Dull there. Old as the lack of a pint in my hand." He frowned at the fibrous look of the dull crescent. "Lammy, this. Worked wrong in the heats. Hammered thin for show, like a lovely lie. Whoever signed this hook, fit. Wanted home for tea more than he wanted to be right." He looked up at Eamon. "You'll want me to say that to a man with a red face and a blue coat." Eamon nodded. "Board of Trade at noon." Larkin snorted. "Briggs will have me cleaning flues forever." "You like your flues clean anyway," Eamon said. "And I like living boys." Larkin considered the shard again and grunted. "Bring me the other half if they let you. The grain will speak. Iron tells its own time, if you let it." Back in the yard, the signalman from Kestrel, cap straighter now, cornered Eamon behind the water crane. "I sent a wire. South," he said, eyes nervous. "Company hates it, but the Board of Trade hates bodies more. Captain Harrow's on the morning coach. He'll want proper statements." Eamon felt more tired than relieved. "They'll make you sorry." "They already do," the man said, and vanished as Briggs came around the tank with Ned and the constable in tow. "Mr. O'Rourke," Briggs said, voice polished, "you will refrain from intimidating witnesses." "Which witness?" Eamon asked. He couldn't stop his eyes flicking to Ned. Briggs set a hand on the boy's shoulder, a stage touch, light and possessive. "This youth is frightened. Your dramatics do not help." "My dramatics kept him out of the river." Briggs's smile thinned. "And put Simmons's spirits into the sand. Do you imagine the ledger cares which liquid it counts? Boys and barrels both have prices in it." Ned drew breath. "Sir, Mr. O'Rourke." He saw the constable's face and faltered. Eamon kept his voice level. "Tell exactly what you did. The wheel, the Sprags, my signal to drop." Briggs's eyes narrowed. He will tell what he remembers once settled. "In the office." "We'll all settle in the office," a new voice said. It came from the yard gate, where a carriage stood and a man climbed down, his coat a plain dark that looked more like work than fashion, his mustache cut in the navel way, gray stiff as wire. Two porters stood up straighter without knowing why. "Captain James Harrow, Board of Trade," he said, showing a card too briefly to be argued with. "Which of you is Mr. Briggs?" Briggs bared his teeth. "I am Foreman Briggs. Welcome. This is a simple matter, and we have nearly concluded." "Excellent," Harrow said dryly. "We will conclude it properly. Clear the line. Bring me the defect book, the coupling remains, and your guard. Driver and fireman too. We will talk where paper cannot be smudged." His eyes skipped to Eamon and paused, the way a man marks a piece of land that might be worth something. "You're the stoker?" "Yes," Eamon said. "Good. Don't run off." Harrow didn't smile. "I dislike chasing truth uphill." They went into the office with coal crunching underfoot like old bones. The captain refused Briggs's chair and stood by the window, light flat on his face. He did not look like a man who enjoyed stories. Briggs laid the defect book down with ceremony. "As you see," he said, flipping to a page. "No entry yesterday regarding—" "Don't show me what isn't there," Harrow said. "Show me what is." He took the book and did something almost rude. He bent it backward, spine toward the light, and ran his thumbnail across the page as if it were a stringed instrument. The paper lifted, a quarter sheet a hair higher than its neighbors. Harrow lifted it. The edge showed a darker seam where glue had dried twice. He looked at Briggs. Nothing in his face moved. "We keep our books in repair," Briggs said quickly. "A pious habit," Harrow murmured. He turned to Eamon. "You made a return?" "I did." "On what day?" "Yesterday, before noon." "On what wagon?" "Third from the guard." Harrow nodded once. And the coupling? Cracked at the eye, Eamon said. He felt the blotter in his cap like heat. Harrow held out his hand. Eamon placed the shard in it, and the captain weighed it on his palm the way Eamon had weighed coal. By ear, by feel, by years. He held it to the window. Old here, he said, tapping the brown. New here. He looked at Briggs again. Get me the other half. The yard is busy, Briggs said. The yard will be busier if you make me fetch it myself, Harrow said without raising his voice. Briggs went, stiff-backed. In the quiet, Ned's breath rasped. Pike rubbed his shoulder and pretended not to. Harrow turned to Miss Whitlow in the doorway. Clerk, bring me today's blotter. She blanched, then glanced at Eamon's cap. He didn't move. She swallowed and brought a clean sheet. Harrow took it, then said, almost conversationally, Men who mean to be believed learn early to save what's ephemeral. Ink dries. Paper is burned. But pressure leaves ghosts. Have you a ghost for me, Mr. O'Rourke? Eamon set his cap on the desk and unfolded the square of pink. He placed it beside the book. Harrow read the mirror writing without effort, lips tightening on some private arithmetic. Thank you, he said, not to Eamon alone. Miss Whitlow's shoulders dropped by a quarter inch. Briggs returned with the coupling half on a canvas sling. The room gathered around its dead weight. Harrow set the shard to its mouth. The edges matched like teeth. He blew the dust, then wet a thumb, and stroked along the brown crescent. Rust bled like old tea. He looked up. One more question, he said. Who signed the prior inspection of this hook? Briggs did not answer quickly enough. Miss Whitlow very quietly said, Your hand, sir. We will, Eamon said, and felt the shard in his pocket bite his palm like a promise. Silence found the room after Miss Whitlow's quiet sentence and held it by the throat. Briggs managed a laugh sharp and thin. Clerks become sentimental. I countersign many things. Harrow didn't blink. You countersigned glue? He flexed the defect book's spine so the mended leaf gaped. When was this page replaced? Briggs's smile stayed, only the eyes going small. Pages where? We keep the book tidy. Tidy is a cousin of tampered, Harrow said. He set the coupling half on the desk. It thudded with a closing sound, like a lid on a truth. Miss Whitlow, who keeps the blotters? I do, she said. Her hands were steady because she made them so. We burn them Saturdays. It's Sunday, Harrow said. I am glad fire keeps the Sabbath. He lifted the pink square Eamon had brought and read the mirror scrawl once more. Mr. Briggs, this man's entry existed. Your book now says it did not. Tell me why. Briggs's tone turned fatherly. Captain, if we indulged every fancy a Stoker scratches into a margin, we'd never move a wagon. Men like Mr. O'Rourke, impulsive, quick to dramatize. Harrow's head tilted. Men like Mr. O'Rourke kept your passengers off like river, why, last night. He half turned. Bring in your smith. Tom Larkin filled the doorway like a door. He touched his cap to no one and set the iron on the windowsill where the weak light could work. With a nail, he teased rust from the dull crescent, then snapped the nail between his fingers and used the broken tip to trace the grain. New bright here, he said, tapping where shine met brown. Old dull there. Lamination in the forging. See how the grain pulls like pulled bread? Bad heat? Thin hammer? Or some devil of both? Crack walked out from the old wound till a bump finished it. He looked up, unawed. Hook was sick before last night. You can send me to sweep flues for saying so. Harrow made a note with a stub pencil. Consider yourself sworn. He didn't look at Briggs when he said it. The signalman from Kestrel spoke next, cap twisted in both hands. Saw white from the van roof, sir. He cut the air with it, then pointed the drag. I threw for the pit. Mail passed clean on the main. Pike cleared his throat. He signaled me to drop at the points, he said. Words coming like coal he had to shovel. I held countersteam and sanded hard. He climbed, coupled us on the run. Then he pulled. His mouth found a crooked smile at the memory's lunacy. I called him mad yesterday. I won't today. Ned's turn. He stood small in the map of sunlight on the floor, wrist-bound, lips chewed pale. He told me to whine so the brake bit, not feather, he said, voice thin but steady. Gave me the tail lamp and showed me how to open it. Drove Spraggs into the wheels hisself. Put his hand on my back when we hit. That's all I know. That's enough, Harrow said, not unkindly. He looked at Briggs. Your witnesses prefer living boys to tidy pages. Briggs's face cooled by degrees. Captain, you are a guest in a working yard? Men romanticize after a fright. They collude without knowing it. Signalman's pride, a boy's gratitude, a smith's love of hearing his own lore. This Irishman prefers theater to discipline. He destroyed cargo worth... Barrels count easier than bones, Eamon said softly. Briggs's eyes cut to him. You imagine courage excuses sabotage. Sabotage? Larkin barked. The only sabotage here is a book with a page pushed back and crooked. Harrow lifted a hand, and the room quieted the way a boiler does when the regulator closes. He set his pencil down and spoke without heat, the way a surgeon might. Facts first. A defect entry was made and pressed on blotting paper. The corresponding page in the book has been disturbed. The hook shows an old flaw extended by service and finished last night. The Stoker's actions, however irregular, prevented a collision at a converging junction. He looked at Briggs. These will be my preliminary findings in writing by tonight. Color left Briggs's cheeks, and something meaner replaced it. Board reports don't fill ledgers. Simmons and Sons will have damages. Someone will pay. If not the Irishman, then his friends. His gaze brushed Miss Whitlow, then Ned. Like a draft you only notice after you've chilled. Harrow's voice went colder. Threats are dull instruments, Mr. Briggs. Try a sharper one. Procedure. Who authorized alterations to the defect book? Briggs straightened. I did. As foreman, I consolidate trivialities and remove redundancies that impede operation. Redundancies like warnings? Harrow asked. You'll hand me your standing orders and any circulars regarding defect recording and retention. Briggs opened his mouth, closed it. They're in the out of safe. Of course they are, Harrow said. He turned to Eamon. Mr. O'Rourke, your suspension is lifted pending the board's report. You will attend me at the summit in 1 hour to walk the sequence. Lamp, hook, brake, points. Bring the guard and driver. We will meet also at the drag. Truth enjoys being seen twice. Something in Eamon unclenched he hadn't known he was clenching. Aye, sir. Briggs's lip curled. Promoted to guide now, are we? You think a day's luck makes you a man to keep? I can still see you turned off, O'Rourke. Simmons will not be the only letter on my desk. Eamon met his eyes. Ink can lie, he said again, and touched the coupling half, with his knuckles, as a man might touch a headstone. Iron doesn't. They spilled back into thin daylight. Cold climbed the yard, out of the sleepers. Men went to work with the spare carefulness of a place that has survived its own intent. Eamon found the boy beside the water crane, head tipped back as he drank from his palms. You did right, Eamon said. Right is harder to carry than wrong, but it rides lighter in the end. Ned wiped his mouth. Will they sack you? Ask me after the hill, Eamon said. He turned at a rustle and found Miss Whitlow there, a shawl over her shoulders, looking smaller under the sky than she had under the office ceiling. I'll be moved, she said, without preface. Clerks who speak are sent to smaller rooms. Then smaller rooms will be better for being honest, Eamon said. Her mouth flickered. Bring the captain one more truth when you can. Foreman Briggs keeps two ledgers, the one he shows and the one he trusts. Check the drawer under the window ledge. Eamon nodded once. She left as if she had only been passing. Pike came up, rubbing his jaw. Can you still hear out your left ear? Only the useful things, Eamon said. Then hear this, Pike said gruffly. I'll back your account at the summit. A man ought to fix the names he's called. They shouldered their coats and took the path toward the incline, boots sucking at the damp ballast. Behind them, the office window threw a pale square on the yard. A figure stood in it, still as a nail. Briggs watched them go, as if he could stop them with looking. Let the hill speak, Harrow had said. Eamon lifted his lantern even in daylight, a habit now. The day had the thin shine of a blade being whetted. Ahead, the summit waited with its small signs. A scuffed sleeper, a bright scratch on an iron jaw, a bit of ash where a lamp had blown out. He felt the old fear move in him like a ghost, and he did what he had done last night. He walked toward it. The hill does not forget. By noon, the fog had lifted into a thin milk and the wind slicked every rail. Harrow made them start at the summit board, where last night Eamon had heard iron speak wrong. Stand where you stood, the captain said. Eamon put his boots in the scuffed gravel where his heel had torn a crescent. Pike took the cab step he'd left. Ned stood by the post with his bound wrist tucked into his coat as if it belonged there. Harrow watched and waited like a man, listening for a clock in another room. There, Eamon said, pointing to the ballast between sleepers. A line of finer dust cut across the darker grit, where the sheared pin had skittered and bounced. It came up on the tilt. Harrow crouched. The knees of his coat drank damp without complaint. He touched the track like a doctor takes a pulse. And the crack before that? Third wagon from the guard, Eamon said. Eye of the hook. Bright hairline yesterday morning. I wrote it. Harrow's gaze traveled downgrade. Show me how gravity took it. They walked the first 100 yards, counting under their breath. Harrow made Pike demonstrate how much countersteam bought how much drag, had Ned touch the brake wheel and recite, embarrassed, the words Eamon had put in his mouth. Don't feather. Bite. He made Eamon take the lantern and wind his arm until his shoulder burned, and then, with a small nod, enough, took the lamp and tried the arc himself. White bit the noon air the way it had bitten the dark. At the bend before Kestrel, the river threw back a low laugh. The sand drags showed their nightwork like a wound with edges stitched. The trough gouged deeper. The van's print sunk and set. Sprags snapped and half-buried like broken arrows. Harrow took one up and balanced it on 2 fingers. At speed? He asked. At the last, Eamon said, remembering the slam in his bones. Harrow looked toward the box. The signalman had cleaned his windows. His hand still shook when he lifted it in awkward salute. I saw his white, he called, unbidden. And the 8. God help me, I'd have thrown for the main if he hadn't. Harrow tipped his hand and turned away. He took notes, not in a rush, but as if the act itself could slow time and make it line up. Briggs arrived with a gentleman in a dark, well-fed coat whose eyebrows met like a bridge. Mr. Caldwell of Simmons & Sons, Briggs announced, grateful for a new audience. Captain, we must discuss compensation for cargo destroyed by your hook's prior injury, Harrow said without looking up. We will discuss everything, in order. His pencil scratched. Mr. Caldwell, I assure you the board measures loss in more than gallons. Caldwell sniffed as if the air had insulted him. We pay for punctuality, Captain. We do not pay for theatrics. Eamon kept his mouth shut and let the hill argue. It did, in marks anyone could read if they set aside pride. The first skids of brake before the grade steepened. The thick scatter of sand where the engine had dug in. The milky stain where spirits had flashed across grit and frozen in lace. Ned touched the place where he and Eamon had hit, and flinched with the memory traveling up his bones. Pike stood farther off, looking at the diamond where the mail had slid past with its indifferent grace. Harrow closed his notebook. Enough for now. He glanced at Eamon. You hinted there is more truth at the office. Eamon felt the warning rise. Do not name the clerk, and swallowed it. Foreman Briggs keeps copies, he said, careful as stepping on a wet sleeper. Some not on the shelf. Briggs smiled, thin and genteel. Everything I keep is where a gentleman may see it. Then a gentleman will, Harrow said. Come. They walked back with the wind at their backs and the yard ahead drawing itself straight, as if a visitor made it ashamed. Miss Whitlow stood framed by the office window, a small blot of gray against gray. She did not look down at them. Her hand, smoothing a page, drifted for a breath to the sill and tapped, once, twice, as if counting. Then she turned and was gone. In the office, Briggs had arranged a stage. Defect book set square, a pot of sand for blotting, the board circulars laid like good linen. Caldwell hovered by the stove, with the look of a man about to lecture an unpaid apprentice. Harrow did not sit. Standing orders, he said. And your copies. Briggs drew himself tall. I do not keep duplicates. We are not a ministry. Miss Whitlow took a breath audible only to Eamon. He kept his eyes on Harrow. The captain drifted to the window. Noon left a gray coin of light on the glass. He stood a moment with his palm on the sill the way a man checks if bread is done. Then, almost idly, he ran his thumb along the underside lip where old paint had built a ridge. His nail caught. He pressed. Not hard. Wood answered with a small, very domestic click. The private sound of a drawer you're not meant to know is there. Briggs moved. The motion was nothing, an adjustment of cuff, a half step, but it was the first honest thing he'd done all day. Harrow did not look at him. He reached under, found a seam, and slid. A shallow drawer rolled out of the sill with a whisper of paint and dust. Inside lay a narrow ledger bound in black cloth, the sort stationers call a daybook, its corners shiny with use. No title on the spine. No label. A scrap of ribbon peeped like a tongue. No one breathed. Harrow took out the book and laid it on the desk where the light was worst. He did not open it. Is that mine? Briggs asked, and heard himself. Too late. Everything in this room is yours, until it becomes the board's, Harrow said. His voice had the quiet that steel has when it stops being a bar and starts being a blade. He turned the cover with his thumb. Caldwell made a small, involuntary sound and masked it with a cough. On the first page, a neat hand, not Miss Whitlow's, had written a private truth in tidy rows. Dates, wagon numbers, consigners, valuations, remarks that would never see a circular. In the gutter, next to yesterday's date, a line. 3rd from guard. I, Lammy. Leave to run. Replace at night. Beside it, an initial that was not Eamon's. Harrow's pencil hovered in the air, as if even led Danmo to mark what it understood. Mr. Briggs, he said without looking up. Who writes this book? The foreman's mouth moved. Nothing came out. Harrow turned another page. The sound of paper sliding over paper was loud as a verdict. Anne's, Briggs's throat worked once, twice. That is a private traffic memorandum, he said at last, light as dust. Valuations, reminders, nothing for the board. Harrow's finger rested half an inch above the ink. 3rd from guard. I, Lammy. Leave to run. Replace at night. Initialed A.B. He glanced up. Is that your hand, Mr. Briggs? Briggs tried a smile that had nowhere to sit. Common initials. Harrow turned a leaf. The room listened to paper. October 3rd. Axle hairline. No stop till Sunday. A.B. September 21st. Van wheel thin at rim. Watchman to turn a blind eye. A.B. Another page. June 12th. Brake blocks chattered. Oil and send. A.B. He shut the book with a mildness that hurt. You have been writing shorthand for gambling with other men's lungs. Caldwell coughed into his gloved fist. Captain, with respect, such notes are the grease that keeps commerce. Commerce is not a god, Harrow said without heat. And if it were, the first thing it would demand is a child. He lifted the hidden ledger and handed it to the constable. Seal this. If anyone asks, tell them a Board of Trade officer instructed you, which is precisely what is happening. The constable, who had looked bewildered all morning, suddenly looked sturdier. He slid the book into a canvas satchel whose mouth he tied with a neat square knot. Briggs took a half step he could not take back. You will ruin this yard, Briggs said, voice gone thin and vicious. Over a Stoker's theater and a boy's fright. You'll have wagons stacked to the horizon. Simmons will sue. Caldwell stiffened, then rearranged his face into expense. My directors do not relish interruptions. Harrow's gaze took them both as if measuring timber. Then, they should stop paying for shortcuts. Mr. Caldwell, you may take down a note to your board. The incline remains closed until every coupling on this roster is struck, proved, or replaced. If your directors are displeased, they may write to the board with their displeasure. I promise to read it. After I finish arranging so your letters are not written in condolence. Caldwell's eyebrows found each other, then parted again as he remembered breathing. Briggs turned to Eamon, relief's mean cousin in his eyes. There. Hear it? Closed. Idle men, hungry families, and all because an Irishman wanted applause. Eamon felt the old heat rise, the one that made fists before it made sentences. He shut his hand on the coupling half instead. I wanted the mail to pass on rails and not through water, he said. If you want applause, sir, listen to how a river claps when a coach goes into it. Tom Larkin barked a laugh. He didn't try to swallow. Pike's mouth tugged sideways and then straightened. A man remembering himself. Miss Whitlow stood still in the doorway, shawl neat, face empty in the way that keeps women's lives longer. Harrow saw her. Miss Whitlow, in your ordinary course, where would such a daybook be kept? In a drawer under the sill, she said. As you found it. And who writes in it? Her eyes did not move. Foreman Briggs. Briggs's flush climbed, ungovernable now. You little... Harrow's look cut him off, crisp as a whistle. You will address no one as little while I occupy a square foot of this room. He turned the defect book again, laid the blotter alongside the mended page, and spoke, so even the stove listened. Preliminary. A flagrant defect was logged by Mr. O'Rourke. The corresponding entry has been obliterated from the formal book. A private ledger contains an instruction, initialed by the foreman, to leave to run a wagon whose coupling later failed on a steep gradient. The Stoker's subsequent actions, and the drivers and guards, prevented collision and loss of life. This yard's practices will be placed before the company directors and, if required, a magistrate. Caldwell found his voice. Captain Harrow, on behalf of Simmons & Sons. On behalf of Simmons & Sons, Harrow said. I suggest you employ your influence to insist your consignments be hauled by men who prefer truth to neatness. He looked to the constable. Fetch the watch committee's clerk. Mr. Briggs will be held to answer for interference with safety records. You can't, Briggs began. I can ask a magistrate to consider it, Harrow said, and until then, you are removed from duty. He turned to Pike, to Larkin, to the signalman peering in through the frosted pane. We will need 3 witnesses with hands on iron and no talent for embroidery. Pike snorted softly. That'd be Tom twice. Make it thrice if you need, Captain, Larkin said. Harrow faced Eamon last, which felt worse than first. You understood a grade not by figures, but by feel. You read a hill like a man reads his own bad leg. That is a use I can't teach from a desk. He reached into his coat and took out a card, ordinary as bread. There are driver's exams in spring. Take this to the Carlisle superintendent. If you do not present yourself, I will be cross. The room tilted. Not flattery. Instruction. Eamon took the card. His hand had coal ground into the ridges. The white went gray where his skin touched it. "Aye, sir," he said, and realized he'd wanted that aye for years. Ned, who had been trying not to cry and breathe at the same time, hiccuped a laugh that escaped anyway. He wiped his face with his sleeve as if to hide it, then gave up and grinned like a boy allowed to be a boy. Briggs saw his grip on the day slip and lunged for the only lever left to him. "You think this clerk's gossip and an Irishman's blotter will carry a boardroom? You think men in London care how a lamp looks in fog? Caldwell's letters will arrive before yours, Captain. The company hates noise." "Then here's a quiet for them," Harrow said. He picked up the coupling half and set it down again. Flat. The sound, a dull bell. Iron speaking. He looked at Miss Whitlow. "Copy my remarks, and send them to London and Newcastle. Post the closure, and inform the director's office I request an immediate inspection of standing orders at Sharrow Fell." "Yes, Captain." She bent to write. The scratch of her pen as steady as a level. Caldwell stared at the bit of iron as if it had grown insolence. "What am I to tell my board about their losses?" "Tell them to visit a churchyard and decide which numbers they prefer," Harrow said. He turned to the door, then paused. "Mr. O'Rourke, take the guard and tell his mother. Bring her here for compensation to be arranged properly. Then, sleep. If I find you on the footplate in the next 6 hours, I will have you flogged by an angel." Eamon blinked. "Aye, sir." Outside, the yard air cut clean, almost sweet after office ink. Men who had weighed him with their eyes now lifted hands. Awkward, not quite salutes. The signalman touched his cap as if it might blow away. Pike bumped Eamon's shoulder, rough affection pretending to be clumsiness. "Driver in spring," Pike muttered. I'll try to live that long to see it." "You'll live to curse me for breaking too hard on good track," Eamon said. Ned hovered, hope warring with the guilt fear teaches. Eamon hooked an arm around the boy and steered him toward the gate. "Come on. We'll tell her with the truth first. Let the yard keep its ink." Behind them, in the window, Briggs stood very still, eyes black with a math that had run out of numbers. In the glass, he could see his own hat next to Harrow's turned shoulder, and beyond that, the hill. The hill said nothing, because it had already spoken. "Were," Harrow said, still mild. "Or, I will read it to you." The almshouse smelled of soap boiled too long. Women bent over pails, in a row, skirts tucked, hands red with winter. Ned's mother was the smallest of them. She didn't see the boy first. She heard his breath. She straightened fast, eyes already braced for bad news. "It's not that," Eamon said, palms up. "He's hurt. Not broken. He did right." Ned held out his bandaged wrist like a report card. "Mum, I wound it till it bit. Mr. O'Rourke showed me." Her mouth trembled, then set. She touched Ned's face, as if confirming he matched the boy she'd given the town. "You did your job," she said. "That's all we can ask God." Only after that did she look at Eamon. "They say it was Irish trouble." "They would," Eamon said. "But it was iron trouble first." She nodded once, an economy earned by years. "Then I'll be angry at iron, not you." She poured him tea that tasted of tin and thanks. "Will they keep him?" she asked, eyes on Ned. "If I can help it," Eamon said. "The boardman's not blind." On the way back, they found a man tugging down the fresh closure notice nailed to the yard gate. The paper had the board's formal voice. "Incline closed, pending examination of couplings." The man was in Simmons' livery and had brought a penknife to the board's seal. "Leave it," Eamon said. "Orders," the man said. My master's ink outranks yours. Pike came shouldering out of the coal stage. The signalman trudged up from the box. Tom Larkin leaned his rasp like a spear across his shoulder. None of them raised a fist. They didn't need to. The Simmons man swore under his breath, stuffed his knife away, and walked off quick enough to keep his dignity. Miss Whitlow passed them with her shawl folded square. Her desk drawer fit into a box carried by a porter. She kept her gaze level. Eamon tipped his cap. I'm sorry, he said. For what? She asked. Writing like I was taught? Her mouth made the ghost of a smile. Women are moved for less. If they send me to a smaller room, I'll bring a larger pen. You gave the truth a spine, Eamon said. Truth has a spine, she said. Men, just keep trying to bend it. A boy from the watch committee came running with a folded notice. Mr. O'Rourke? He held it out with importance bigger than his boots. Eamon read, hearing at 4 o'clock, town room, parties to attend. Briggs's name sat neat beneath, as if truth needed his hand to be official. Harrow's name was there too, making the paper heavier. Go home and wash, Pike told Eamon. You're about to be put on a shelf and examined. Come with me, Eamon said. I will, Pike said. He can laugh at our caps together. Eamon slept exactly 11 minutes in a chair and woke with his heart still running. He polished his boots with a rag that smelled like every footplate he'd stood on. He wrote his statement in a hand that had learned to be legible under bad light. He stared at the word Irish and left it out. Not to hide it, but because the iron didn't care what vowels he used. The town room was a square of cold wood and promises. The watch committee clerk stacked papers like plates. Caldwell arrived with a solicitor in a black coat and a frown that could be rented to funerals. Briggs stood behind them, jaw tight enough to crack a walnut. Captain Harrow stood at the far end, not seated. The coupling half on the table like a brown loaf that no one wanted to touch. The constable put the hidden daybook down beside it and planted his hand on the canvas satchel, like a man feeling his own pocket watch. The magistrate was a thin man with a soft voice that made people lean in. We'll have plain speech, he said. No thunder. Mr. Caldwell, your counsel. The solicitor rose with the confidence of a man who had never run downhill faster than his own balance. My client's losses are not a question. Barrels broken, goods, perfumed into the air. A polite titter. The question is whether an employee of this yard took upon himself to override discipline, detach an engine, and willfully destroy cargo. Life, Harrow said. The solicitor turned a smile toward him. We will get to that. He called Briggs first. Briggs walked like a man climbing into a pulpit. We keep order, he said, spreading his hands. Or we try, while some prefer drama. Mr. O'Rourke, a stoker, took control of a situation beyond his grade. If he had waited, Pike said under his breath, we'd be letters and splinters. We might have secured the train properly, Briggs finished. Instead, panic. Mr. Briggs, the magistrate said. Did you alter the defect book? Of course not, Briggs said. We keep it tidy. Stray leaves are secured. Men write nonsense. One cannot halt operations every time an ink blot takes fright. Harrow didn't look at him. Who initialed leave to run? Briggs's jaw worked. AB are common initials. Are they yours? The magistrate asked. Briggs put on patience like a hat. They could be anyone's. Anyone with your hand, Miss Whitlow said from the back. No drama. Only the right words, at the right volume. The magistrate lifted a finger. She stepped forward, placed the blotter and the mended page together. We burn blotters on Saturdays, she said. Yesterday was Saturday. We did not, Harrow said. Providence keeps odd hours. Tom Larkin was called. He did not bow to Latin. He spoke about grain and heat and bad hammering like a man listing tools. He tapped the brown crescent, and rust came away like old tea. "Sick before the night," he said. "You can pretend a cough is a song, but it still kills." The solicitor tried his angle like a knife at a button. "Mr. O'Rourke," he said when it was Eamon's turn, "have you ever been written up for insubordination?" "Yes," Eamon said. "Do you drink?" "When I can afford it," Eamon said, and let the room's laugh spend itself. "Not before a run." You uncoupled at speed, climbed between buffers, and directed the signal man with a hand. Namp. "You're aware that such theater is improper?" "I'm aware it kept the mail out of the river," Eamon said. "Ask the engine, ask the boy's wrist, ask the sand on the drag. Ask the barrels," the solicitor said, pleased with himself. "You see? This man prefers noise." Harrow picked up the coupling half and set it down again. The sound filled the room. "Ask the iron," he said. The magistrate rubbed his temple like a man feeling weather change. "Mr. Caldwell, if your counsel has finished," blunting himself on the Stoker, "I'd like to see the inside of that book in the sill." The constable untied the satchel mouth and slid the daybook out with the care of a midwife. Harrow opened to yesterday's square and read the line. The room heard and the words, like a lamp being opened. "Third from guard, I. Lammy. Leave to run. Replace at night. A.B." He looked up. "Why at night, Mr. Briggs?" Briggs tried every expression he'd practiced in mirrors. None of them fit. "Less disruption. Less witness," Harrow said. "This yard has boiled truth down until it fit inside your drawer." Caldwell's solicitor opened his mouth to object. The magistrate raised a hand before the script could start. "Enough," he said. "I need 10 minutes with these books, and with my own eyes." He stood, and everyone else scrambled to decide whether to stand too. When he left, the room was a box of held breath. Ned's mother, small, beside the door, pinched her apron hem until her knuckles blanched. Miss Whitlow stared at a knot in the floorboard like it could keep her in town. Pike rolled a match between his fingers and didn't strike it. Eamon looked at the coupling half. He could see the river in the brown crescent as if rust could hold water. He kept his hands loose and his mouth shut. He wanted to be angry, but anger was a fast horse that broke legs. Harrow stood shoulder to shoulder with him, not close enough to comfort exactly, but enough to say he was not across the aisle. "When he comes back," Harrow murmured, "don't gild. Say the words you said on the hill. Men who have never been near a grade like to be walked down it." Eamon nodded. He felt the day gather its weight again. He thought of the lamp in his hand and the signalman's levers and the moment when the hill took a side. He thought of his father's one lesson that lasted. Don't make a speech when a sentence will do. The magistrate came back with a face like shut weather. He sat, put his palms flat on the table, and looked first at Briggs, then at Eamon. The room went so quiet you could hear ink dry. "I have my answer," he said. The magistrate folded his hands as if closing a book. "Foreman Briggs," he said, "you altered a safety record, kept a clandestine ledger, and permitted a defective coupling to leave to run on an incline. You are removed from duty, bound over to appear before quarter sessions, and the watch will hold your daybook." He nodded to the constable, who already had it under his palm. "Mr. Caldwell, your losses fall on the company whose agent chose neatness over safety. You will seek them there, not from the men who kept your letters out of the river." Caldwell started to object, then thought of the coupling, half-winking brown, on the table, and chose silence. "As to Mr. O'Rourke," the magistrate went on, "his actions were irregular, and exactly proportionate to an emergency created by negligence. He prevented collision and loss of life. He is commended." The soft voice sharpened. "And if anyone in this town whispers sabotage into that boy's life again, he can answer to me." Ned's mother stitched her fingers together at her apron and blinked hard at the floorboards. Pike nodded once. Small. Proud. Tom Larkin blew air through his mustache like a bellows emptying. Briggs made one last bid. Captain Harrow. Magistrate. This board will make a martyr of a stoker and a villain of a foreman for doing what foremen must. We move goods. We cut corners. Or nothing moves. Harrow looked at him as if considering a failed rivet. Sometimes nothing should move. Today is one of those times. He turned to Eamon. Collect the guard's wage for the hours he will miss. I have written a note. The paymaster will obey it. He slipped a folded paper across. Then take a day. Driver's exams in spring. I meant what I said. Outside, cold light lay over the yard like flour on a board. Men drifted out of the town room with the human noises that follow a hard truth. Throat clears, shoe scuffs, a laugh released too fast. Ned's mother touched Eamon's sleeve with 2 fingers, not quite a handshake. You kept my boy, she said. That pays more than barrels. Eamon had no speech for that. He kept himself, he said. I only showed him where to put the weight. The signalman came up awkward, hat in both hands. I'll get a bollocking for panic, I expect. You'll get named in the report for throwing right, Harrow said behind him, dry as rail dust. Learn to take a compliment as if it's heavy. By late afternoon, the closure boards were up. Men with chalk ticked couplings one by one, Larkin's hammer doing its grave little talk on each hook. Miss Whitlow came past with her box and a new sheet pinned to the top. Temporary transfer, Kestrel and Holloway District, ledger oversight. Someone had taken the trouble to add in a smaller hand. By request of Captain J. Harrow. I said smaller rooms get a larger pen, she told Eamon without stopping. They gave me more rooms instead. You made a page speak, Eamon said. That's a rare thing. It's not rare, she said. Men just don't like what it says. At dusk, Eamon climbed the grade alone. Frost hardened the face of the hill again. Rails breathed the last of the day's warmth like cattle do in winter. He stood where the pin had bounced and watched the valley pull its fog over its head. From here, the junction looked tame, a toy. It hadn't been. Pike's boots crunched up behind him. You gonna stand here till you sprout? Only till I hear it quiet, Eamon said. You heard the hill last night and it took your side, Pike said. Don't make a religion of it. I won't, Eamon said. But I'll keep listening. Pike squinted toward the box. Word is, Briggs's desk looks like a church after market. Empty. They say Caldwell wrote a letter and swallowed half of it before he sealed it. He shifted, suddenly awkward. I said some things yesterday about poets. You were right, Eamon said. Poetry's not for the firebox. Listening is. Pike stuck out a hand like a man offering a truce to his own pride. They shook, brief and hard. Ned huffed up last, sling neat around his wrist. His cap pulled down as if to keep his head from floating away. My mum says if I'm going to be a guard, I'd better grow into a bigger coat. You'll grow into the wheel first, Eamon said. Then the coat. They stood a minute. 3 figures, on the shoulder of a hill that had almost taken their names. Down at the yard, a lamp bloomed, and another answered. Iron answered back, with a low so-saw hum. The world, inconvenienced, prepared to go on. Weeks later, on a raw spring morning that still felt like the bottom of a river, Eamon stood in Carlisle in front of a superintendent with a face like a rulebook. He sat the driver's exam with sweat inside his gloves and the ghost of a lamp in his hand. He did not mention poetry. He mentioned gradients and loadings and how sand behaves when it's not in the mood to help. When he came out, Pike was waiting with 2 tin mugs that banged together the way men do when they don't suffer. So sucker so suffer siture. Past? Pike asked. They said come back Tuesday for a cap I'm not to spoil, Eamon said, and let himself grin until his face hurt. He kept the coupling shard wrapped in a rag in his locker. Not as a relic, but as a reminder that iron tells time and stories without ink. On certain nights, when fog moved low and the grade spoke its old language, he'd touch that rag and remember a boy with his hands on a brake wheel, and a clerk with a pen she refused to use as a blade, and a captain who liked truth seen twice. Briggs? The quarter sessions read out words that hollow men. Caldwell's letters arrived heavy and left light. The daybook became a cautionary tale told to new clerks, the way mothers tell children about wells. And on a hill with a name no one in London had to learn to pronounce, a stoker no one trusted learned to trust himself, and made the hill return the favor. When power rewrites the page, listen to the thing that doesn't. Steel. Slope. The steady hand of a kid at a brake wheel. Courage isn't noise. It's clarity under pressure. Ink can lie. Iron doesn't. Enjoyed this story of fight back and dignity? Subscribe for more cinematic, true-feeling tales where the underestimated win, the truth cuts through the noise, and the ending hits hard.